Hope you like my little movie, Mr. Prater. Scary.
Al Jolly is seemingly an ordinary Midwestern family man and father, but beneath his welcoming facade, Al harbors a chilling secret identity. He is an active serial killer known as Rapunzel. He earned his nickname because he ritualistically targeted women with ponytails, strangling them and preserving their ponytails as his gruesome trophies.
Ponytails. Al's fetish. His need.
Al skillfully operates under the radar, balancing a neat suburban life with the dark urges that compel him to kill. In his public life, he has a loving wife and 4 children who seem to adore him and enjoy regular activities like playing sports and posing for family pictures.
So you have a kid?
Oh yeah, I got a whole litter of them.
His front-facing, affable personality is reminiscent of a killer we are all too familiar with, Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Al and Arthur, better known as the Trinity Killer, stood as 2 profoundly different, yet obviously related figures within the Dexter universe. In retrospect, both men show patterns that illuminated an interesting dichotomy in human nature and a terrifyingly thin line between the ordinary and the macabre. Al operated behind a front of everyday normalcy. He projects an image of cheer and harmless eccentricity and appears to treat his wife and children with the utmost respect, both in public and behind closed doors. Arthur, on the other hand, embodied the chilling archetype of a wolf in sheep's clothing. He seemed like a kind family man, but behind the scenes, he pulled off decades worth of methodical, ritualistic killings and treated his family like his property, his prisoners. Despite these differences, both of their stories highlight that killers don't always appear in the noticeable form most of us might expect. Instead, occasionally they might be hiding in plain sight, masked by routine, kindness, and respectable structures of family and community involvement. When people reflected on Al Jolly, they often considered how charisma could serve as a cloak. He represented the unsettling idea that joviality and warmth could be weaponized. His outward persona was colorful, lively, and disarming.
Mamma mia!
Here we go again.
Oh, look at you.
Hi, honey.
Yet beneath that exterior lay shadows that few initially perceived. Similarly, Arthur Mitchell perfected the performance of normalcy. He was a church deacon, a community volunteer, a loving father, and a faithful husband, at least in the eyes of neighbors and colleagues. His mask worked because it was built on the very institutions society valued most: faith, family, and charity. Both Jolly and Mitchell demonstrated how predators survived, not by standing out, but by blending in. They relied on the assumptions people carried about appearances, and those assumptions allowed them to operate for years without scrutiny. The distinction, however, is shown in how their legacies unfolded. Al's menace carries an air of unpredictability. His instability is bubbling close to the surface, always one ponytail from breaking through. But with the Trinity Killer, unpredictability gave way to ritual. He killed in cycles and patterns, committing murders in a specific order that reflected his own family trauma. Each kill represented a reenactment of something awful that happened to him during his childhood. His ritual was his way of reliving and overcoming the pain he endured. And Al is more frightened because he is almost chaotic, while Arthur was terrifying because he was systematic and still could never be caught. The spontaneity of Al's kills versus the inevitability and predictable nature of Arthur's is notable, but both paths still led to devastation, leaving behind victims who wore very persuasive masks too well to be suspected for their crimes. When Dexter finally unraveled the truth about Arthur, the emotional reckoning hit harder, precisely because of how long Trinity was hidden in plain sight. He was not a sloppy killer or a reckless maniac, but a careful architect of illusion.
I don't know where else to go.
You came to the right place, son.
Al also reminds us that danger does not have to arrive in a clear way. Instead, it could just as easily show up shrouded under the guise of humor and harmlessness. In this way, both Al and Arthur existed on a similar spectrum of deception, though they wielded it in very different ways. Al's deception leaned on personality and charm, while Arthur's relied on a fake family structure and over-the-top religious performances. But both demonstrate that nefarious acts are often more effective effective when they borrow from typical symbols of goodness. What set the Trinity Killer apart, however, was the sheer depth of psychological unwinding that his behavior brought to light. Arthur's killings peeled back every layer of his life so thoroughly that we all came to understand how his cycle of violence had been born from a single traumatic incident in his childhood. His rituals were not random. They were anchored to grief that came from the death of his sister, the abuse of his father, the suicide of his mother. Each kill in his ritual replayed those moments, granting him the illusion of control over the suffering that once defined him. But Al's need to kill is less structured, instead being more tied to an individual pathology that appears to be related to his mother. Where Arthur represented the chilling consequences of ritualized trauma, Al represents the danger of unchecked, deep-seated instability lurking behind feigned charm. Together, Rapunzel and Trinity map out different psychological blueprints of violence, as well as the importance of seeming safe and normal to those around you. There is still the stark difference of how they treated their families.
Hey, kids.
Daddy.
Hey, Dad.
Al's relationship with his family seemed deeply important to him, and while Arthur's family life was central to his identity, his family was simply a cover and another extension of his ritual. His wife and children lived under the pressure of his domination, locked into the same cycles of fear that mirrored his victim's suffering. His daughter acted out, his son rebelled, and his wife enabled in service of preserving the outward image of perfection Arthur wanted to project. Al, however, relied less on family dynamics and more on the social performance, engaging in relationships that helped sustain his cover without the elaborate domestic theater that Arthur's mask required. This distinction made Trinity's downfall more tragic. When Dexter killed Arthur, he also shattered the carefully maintained illusion that had trapped his entire household. His daughter and wife were devastated, and his son Jonah would go on to become a killer himself. His daughter Rebecca would go on to take her own life, and Jonah killed his mother Sally when he discovered his sister's body. The Mitchell family was completely destroyed by Arthur's death, even more so than they were when he was alive. Regardless of these differences, interestingly enough, Al and Arthur play complementary roles. Al's behavior shows that trauma can be well hidden and not impact the people who come after him, while Arthur's character arc is basically a case study in how childhood trauma can perpetuate violence for generations to come. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. Dexter's pursuit of Arthur became one of the most memorable in the show's history because it forced us to reconcile with the duality of a man who could attend church, have a wife and kids, and build houses for charity on the weekends, while secretly destroying lives in a truly disturbing kill ritual. If Al represents a sudden explosion of hidden anger, Trinity represents the same, but in a carefully curated and repetitive fashion. Still, both killers illustrate the reality that evil is not always a random aberration, but something that is sometimes woven seamlessly into the fabric of ordinary lives and caused by horrid upbringings. In the end, the Al and Trinity comparisons circle back to the same unsettling truth that neither man wore the face of what one imagines when they think about what a killer looks like. Both Al and Arthur were pillars of their communities. They were men who seemed approachable, safe, and even admirable.
I'm Alan, by the way.
Oh, Tarla.
Tarla.
This is me. Thank you so much for your help.
Sure.
This alone unsettles the mind because it shatters the myth that we will be able to spot a monster. If people like Al and Arthur could go on killing completely undetected, then anyone can. How would we know? Murderers don't always look the way we expect them to. Al and Arthur's stories reminded us to question the assumptions we make about our neighbors and our surroundings, to look beyond appearances and confront the possibility that the most terrifying figures are sometimes the ones with the widest smiles or the ones preaching the most captivating sermons. Ultimately, Rapunzel and the Trinity Killer served as mirrors, reflecting different facets of the same darkness. They both thrive on charisma and ritual, but Al is shrouded in unpredictability while Arthur was formulaic, acting with precision. Both lived double lives, only made possible because most members of society rarely dig beneath the surface if you seem normal enough. Unlike James Dokes, most of us are too busy to look closely into people's personal lives in our free time. This means that a convenient and convincing lie can be easily overlooked and taken as gospel. By the end of Trinity's story, we were left with the haunting realization that evil does not only lurk in shadows, but sometimes stands out proudly, waving, laughing, or offering help. It is that truth, more than any gruesome detail, that makes the legacies of both Al and Arthur noteworthy. But Al is even more problematic than Arthur because he caught on to Dexter sooner than almost anyone else. Perhaps it was during the conversation when the Gemini killer coyly asked what had changed that was causing all of these problems.
Funny how everything keeps going off the rails this year. I keep asking myself, what is different?
Perhaps it was after he saw Red kill Gareth on the lawn. It could have been all of those things. Either way, at some point, Al figured that Red, aka Dexter, was not to be trusted. Though he never let anyone onto it, Al stopped believing that Red was a normal member of the group. He continually asked about Lowell. He was devastated when it was announced that Lady Vengeance was dead, and he was the first to shout out when the altercation between Dexter and Gemini broke out. He was clearly attached to the members of the group, the members that started dropping like flies when Red was brought in. Once it was just him and Red, Al knew better than to stick around. He tried to avoid plans with a very insistent Dexter, but eventually yielded, agreeing to meet up with Dexter for Cajun pasta after seeing Hamilton. Of course, Dexter was ecstatic when Al agreed to meet up with him. He knew that as soon as they were alone, he would be able to subdue and murder Al in his pre-prepared kill room. Unfortunately for Dexter, Al seemingly knew that as well. He was very apprehensive and decided to stand Dexter up, standing in the cold, waiting for the end of the play so he could catch Al slipping. But the only slipping Al would be doing that night was slipping away. When Dexter called him asking about their dinner plans, Al pretended to be apologetic. He said that he simply forgot to call Red and let him know of the change of plans.
I'm so sorry, Red. I texted Prater and I totally forgot to call you. I'm sorry, buddy.
But what are the odds? Al has always shown almost exaggerated sympathy and empathy. From the death of a dog owned by Lowell's intended victim to the death of Mamma Mia, Al has always seemed overly concerned with the well-being and comfort of others. Except, of course, for his victims. Yet when it came to canceling dinner plans with Red, all of that consideration and sensitivity seemed to fade away. He claimed that he left early because Hamilton wasn't the show he expected it to be. But given how dodgy he had been with Dexter when he initially asked to make plans and how cagey he was being when Dexter asked him if they could meet in Wisconsin sometime, it's obvious that Al didn't trust Red as far as he could throw him. And speaking of throwing things, Al threw his phone out the window as soon as he finished his call with Dexter. He had no intention of staying in touch. The satisfied sigh he lets out as he tosses the phone out the window makes it clear that he knew he had escaped almost certain death. Al may not know that Red is actually Dexter, and he may not know that he was in the presence of the Bay Harbor Butcher, but he knew enough to skip town. His instincts were more honed than his counterparts. Everyone around, even Leon, underestimated Dexter, but not Al. He wasn't taking any chances. That is how Al's frightening mentality works to his advantage. Unlike Lowell, Mia, Gareth, and Leon, Al didn't have a false sense of superiority. He was a truly sick individual, no doubt, but he did not suffer from the imagined self-importance of the other killers that surrounded him. Al has been described as being stuck in the 80s and 90s. He has aged well out of childhood, but there is an instinct within him that prevents him from getting too big for britches. He dresses like he came straight out of a classic sitcom, Wonder Which One. He oscillates between being a caring father and friend to being a ruthless killer, and he laughs like a schoolboy when he kills. It's truly haunting, but Al's childlike nature may be what saved him from Dexter. He lies like a child would to explain away ditching Dexter, but in a more sophisticated way and for far darker reasons. It seems so innocent and convincing, but it's clear when he throws his phone out that avoiding Dexter was a highly calculated move. Dexter was able to get to everyone else in Prater's serial killer club. He managed to kill Prater himself, and even got Charlie to quit and leave New York altogether. Al is truly the last man standing. He was so spooked by the anomalies that happened during Prater's gathering that even if Leon hadn't died, the odds of Al coming back the next year were slim. He wouldn't give Dexter another chance to get him on a kill table. Unfortunately for Al, Dexter has all of his information now. After being locked in Prater's vault, Dexter was forced to find a way out or he would have died in there. In his search for an escape, he found the filing cabinet where Prater stored all of the information he found on everyone related to his serial killer club, even Charlie. Dexter found out her real name, Charlotte Brown, and he also found out Al's real name. Al Jolly was actually Al Walker. Al refused to give Dexter any information about his location in Wisconsin when asked, but with the discovery of Al's file, Dexter will know where he lives and so much more. Al no longer has the safety of a false name and a hidden address. He is just as vulnerable as any of Dexter's victims. So even if he finds out about Prater's disappearance and refuses to return to New York, Dexter is still liable to get him on a kill table sooner or later. With season 1 wrapped up and Al still breathing, there is no doubt that Dexter will have to take him out in the next season of Resurrection. As Lowell said, what happens next is inevitable. Before Al knows it, his lovely wife will be a widow and his children will be fatherless. Because of how psychotic he is behind the perfectly affixed mask he wears, Dexter has no choice but to eliminate him to ensure that he doesn't continue killing innocent women. The only question that remains is, when will Dexter get to him? Al could be the first kill of season 2. Dexter may prioritize taking him out over anyone in New York, partially because of how dangerous he is, and partially to get back at Al for dodging him the first time he tried to kill him. It's also possible that Al could be a long-standing character. Dexter may be too busy with Harrison, or his life in New York more broadly, to get to Al first. Al may become somewhat of a white whale for Dexter. Although Dexter may want to take him out as promptly as possible, plenty of complications could arise that prevent that from happening as soon as he'd like. Even with Batista gone and the Ryan Foster murder penned on Mia LaPierre instead of Harrison, Dexter's life is always far more complicated than the average person's. Driving to Wisconsin to hunt down an experienced serial killer may not be possible right now as the new season kicks off. Al, though disgusting, is an incredibly compelling character that fans wouldn't mind seeing more of. The cat and mouse game he is playing with Dexter is so interesting that the idea of Al remaining a part of the story beyond episode 1 of the next season is not unreasonable. Much like with the Trinity Killer, Al Walker could become the big bad of the upcoming season. Even with Dexter having his address, it's possible that Al will be difficult to catch. He would see Dexter coming and he would avoid him at all costs. He may even want to kill Dexter himself, despite the lack of a ponytail, just for getting so close to his family and his personal life. Al said that he likes to keep the Prater world and his family life separate, and Dexter impeding on that will certainly not sit well with him. Unfortunately for Al, going head-to-head with Dexter never ends well for Dexter's opponent. No matter what happens, he will find himself strapped to a table in a plastic room. He will end up in garbage bags that are either dumped in the ocean or thrown into a furnace. Now that Dexter knows who he is, knows that he is a killer, and has personally witnessed one of his deranged kills, Al's days are numbered. Now it's simply a matter of when and where. If you like this analysis, check out our video breaking down all of the new killers who were introduced this season.